Morning, Grace Church, and any visitors, very big welcome to you. Dave has asked me to talk about Mark 9 this morning, so I'm going to give you some of my thoughts. It's the transfiguration passage. I'll read it to you. Mark 9, 1 to 13 to start with. 2 to 13. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, teacher, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. And then a cloud appeared and enveloped them, and a voice came from the cloud, "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked round, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. And they kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. We'll finish there, I think. That's actually verse 10. This is a time when the disciples had an amazing encounter with God. They went up a mountain with Jesus, just 3 of the key disciples, Peter, James and John, with Jesus. And mountains are traditionally a place in the Old Testament where people have encountered God. Moses was up in the mountain when God's presence came to him in a small, still voice, after it wasn't in the storm, wasn't in the earthquake, wasn't in the fire. And Elijah was up a mountain when he called down fire from heaven to show the people that it was his God that was the real God and not the prophets of Baal. There are references in the Old Testament to going up a mountain to be with God, and Jesus also took his disciples up a mountain, and there they encountered God in a number of different ways. First of all, they encountered God because Jesus was metamorphosed before them. His clothes became brilliant white, whiter than anyone could possibly produce on earth. That was their first experience of God. Secondly, Moses and Elijah showed up, 2 of the old prophets of God who were long dead but still alive, and they showed that they were alive to the disciples and appeared, and Jesus talked to them. It's just amazing to think what the disciples would have thought watching him do this and watching them there. Second experience of God for the disciples. The disciples were confused and afraid, and Peter burbled out, trying to help in a practical way. He didn't know what to say. Probably better not to have said anything, but he said, "Shall we put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah, Lord?" But Jesus didn't respond to Peter's frightened babbling, really. Then there was a third experience of God. They were enveloped in a cloud, and this would have been not just an ordinary cloud, but the cloud that's symbolic of the Shekinah glory of the presence of God. The cloud, like the cloud that used to fill the temple in the Old Testament, full of God's presence and power. So that was their third experience of God. And their fourth experience of God, what a morning this was for them, is they heard God speak, his audible voice, saying about Jesus, "This is my son whom I love, listen to him." Incredible morning for the disciples. And then they walked back down the mountain. I guess Jesus stopped shining brightly white, and Jesus said to them, "Don't tell anyone what you've seen until I've risen from the dead." So the disciples must have been absolutely full of just totally gobsmacked, really, about these 4 encounters with the living God up the mountain, and seeing Jesus in a way they'd never seen him, understanding him a way they never understood him before. And they got down from the mountain, and things dramatically changed, went downhill, if you like. There was an argument going on between the disciples and a group of the religious teachers who were, I'll read you the passage, the second part in Mark 9. Verse 14, starting at verse 14 and going on to verse 29. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. And as soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "O unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," said Jesus, "everything is possible for him who believes." And immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." And when Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him, never enter him again." And the spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. And the boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. And after Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" And he replied, "This kind can come out only by prayer." And that was the fifth encounter that the disciples had with God that morning. Quite a morning for them. This time they saw Jesus exercising his authority over an evil spirit and healing the boy, and also saw his kindness in when the father cried out, "I do believe, help my unbelief," just honestly saying where many of us are find ourselves, certainly I do. He didn't put Jesus off in any sense. He just accepted the man where he was and healed his boy. What a morning it was for the disciples. That was worship, when they went up the mountain and saw something more of who God was and who Jesus was. They were filled with awe and wonder. That was worship. That was their worship. When they saw Jesus perform that amazing healing on the boy that had been ill from when he was a child, that was the response that would come from them was worship to God, because they saw something more of God than they'd seen before. My prayer this morning is that as we meet together and sing the choruses and look at your word and pray together, that will be our worship, in the sense that we see something more of God too, and it draws from us, like it did from the disciples, a deeper sense of understanding of who God is and who Jesus is, and of awe and wonder at the person that we are getting to know more and more.